Hey everybody, welcome back to the Starved Rock Murders. I'm your host, Andy Hale. I've got a special guest today. I've got Jim Ridings. He's an award-winning author, local guy, born in Joliet, got his bachelor's in journalism from Southern Illinois University. He was a reporter for the Daily Times in Ottawa, the Beacon News in Aurora. He has won more than a dozen awards for investigative reporting at both newspapers from the Associated Press, United Press International, Copley Press, other organizations. Also the recipient of the Studs Terkel Humanities Service Award from the Illinois Humanities Council. Has written a lot of books on local issues in the Illinois area. His latest is Murder at Starved Rock, How the System Framed an Innocent Man. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Thank you, Andy.
So how did you first hear about the Starved Rock Murders case, and when did you start following it?
I think it's something I knew most of my life, and it seemed like every few years the subject came up about Chester being innocent, which is unusual. If he's guilty, why would it keep coming up? And it came up again in 1977 when I was on the Ottawa paper, and I knew Bill Dummett, and I talked to him all the time, so I asked him. And he said, oh, no, he's guilty, but so on and so forth. So, that was about it. And I didn't think about it again until I talked to you in 2022, and you told me that you were working on Chester's case. And we discussed it quite a bit, and I decided to look into it. And, once I got into it, I couldn't stop. I kept going. So
I know. Same with me. So you knew Dummett. Tell me what your personal experience was with Dummett, what he was like.
Well, it was just a professional knowledge of him. I covered the sheriff's department, and he was a deputy at the time. And I talked to him now and then. But if you had asked me at the time, do you think he'd be capable of doing something like this? I would have said, yeah, I think so. Maybe. Yeah.
What was his kind of general reputation back then? What did you heard?
Just that he was a dirty cop. I mean, people knew it. But what are you going to do about it? Nobody can do anything about that. That's the whole system.
Yeah, so I want to tell everybody right at the jump here, I forgot to mention, I did a big presentation on the Starved Rock Murders in December of 2025 at the Grand Bear Resort. Spent several hours walking through the case and the evidence. It happened to be the morning of a really bad little blizzard, and so a lot of people, I think including Jim, weren't able to make it. So you know what? I'm going to do an encore presentation. It's not going to be quite as long, but we're going to get into it. Encore presentation Sunday, April 12th, Grand Bear Resort in Utica from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Jim Ridings here is going to be my special guest. He's also going to be talking about his book. He'll have a copy of his book there to sign. I'm going to buy some of those books for people that want them. I really want to support the book. I want to bring as many eyeballs to this case as I can. Its admission's going to be free. I'm going to provide some snacks, some beverages. I'm going to make it as easy as it can be for you to be there. And I urge anybody and everybody who's got an interest in the Starved Rock Murders case, come check us out Sunday, April 12th, Grand Bear Resort, 1 o'clock. And Jim, I'm so glad you can be there with me. It's going to be fun.
It will be, yeah.
So here's what I want to I've got so many questions. I think we can save a lot of it for when we're at Grand Bear. But when you've gone so far to research the case, I know you've been at a lot of court hearings. You've seen testimony live. You've seen how the case has played out. You've written a very thorough book. What would you say stands out to you the most about this whole journey? What stands out to you the most out of the many things that could?
I would say lately what stands out is the judge's decision. It was so outrageous. I don't know what he based it on. He didn't base it on the evidence. He didn't base it on facts. He didn't base it on logic. He didn't base it on the law. So I don't know what he was thinking. But as of late, that's what jumps out at me. It's like, how could he make the decision that he made?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about that. I talked about that at the December presentation. I'm going to talk about that again. I want to share with people the arguments that Will County made in response to some of my evidence, and the judge's ruling in response to my evidence, because I'm with you. I thought it was an egregious misapplication of the facts and the law. And it was, to me, such a shocking and disappointing result that 30-page opinion that he wrote. We're going to get into that. Come to Grand Bay Resort. We'll talk about that quite a bit. And what would you say is some of the evidence that, when did you start to learn about the case, you start to be interested? When did you kind of start turning the corner from, well, maybe Chester's innocent to, gosh, this is really looking like Chester's innocent? Was there a moment where you were starting to kind of like the momentum shifted?
I think about maybe a couple of months after I talked to you. See, I always believed Chester was guilty. Obviously, he's guilty. He confessed. Why would he confess if he didn't do it? He was convicted. He spent all these decades in prison. He must be guilty. It's positive he was guilty. But then when you start digging in and you see the facts, and as you know, there's so many facts. My book is like 300 and some pages, and it's pretty tight. It's just packed with facts and evidence. Once you get into that, you can see, no, this wasn't anything like that at all.
The hard part with something like this, in terms of the court of public opinion. So if you go down to the Starved Rock area, everybody's got an opinion of Chester Weger. Surprisingly, I would tell you this: I've had just an overwhelming show of support. But everybody's heard of the case. Everybody will have an opinion. And this is the thing: everybody's opinion is some kind of anecdotal, something they heard, something their parents told them, their grandparents told them, a gut feeling. Nobody knows all the facts, and I want to make this clear. I don't expect everybody to know the facts. Why would you? These are facts in a court file, in a lawyer's file. Nobody knows all the specific facts, and that's the whole point on why I've been making these presentations, is to share with people the facts. And if you've been following my podcast, like I know you have, I have posted so many original source documents because I wanted to be very transparent. I posted the Lois Zelensek operator memo. I posted the handwritten notes of the crime lab meeting shortly after the murders. I've posted the Glenn Palmatier interview with the Illinois State Police. These documents are there for people to see, and what really stands out to me is, in a case that I feel like is so overwhelming, the way it was covered up in 1960 and 1961 is stunning. And then the way I think the case was defended by the Will County State's Attorney's Office the last several years, and then culminating with the judge's ruling, I think was pretty stunning as well. There's just so much evidence. There's so much there to talk about. And I'm just glad that from 1960, when you think about it, it's incredible that we could even do forensic testing.
Well, something else that jumps out at me besides the judge is what you just said, Will County. Their job is supposed to be to seek justice, and they didn't do that at all. They supposedly did their job of defending the conviction. But that's not their job. Their job is to seek justice, and they didn't do it. And I would be willing to bet they know that Chester's innocent, but they had to do, quote, their job.
It's really a case that there have been so many hurdles for me to overcome. And I always felt like, I was getting over it. There'd be something in my way and I would get over it. There'd be something in the way and I'd get over it. I thought the case should have been over when I got the DNA result. And then I took it a step farther and I did the genetic genealogy. That came back to one of the Bray brothers, Edward Bray being the most likely. And then you combine that with all the other things we've learned, and there's so many. I think, in a way, there's so much evidence that it's so overwhelming that each particular piece kind of gets lost in the shuffle. What I plan on talking about a lot on Sunday for people is I want to cover. I personally am going to talk about, I think, the two most important things: the Lois Zelensek telephone operator memo. I think that was the break in the case. She broke the case wide open, how that got covered up. And then I want to talk about the forensic evidence, the the DNA testing we did on the hair found in Mrs. Murphy, the genetic genealogy testing we did on that hair, and some of the other forensic findings. But there's so much to go into, right? It's just hard to even know where to start.
This case should have been won on so many aspects alone. The DNA alone, Lois Zelensky's report about the listening to the Palmatiers, and the story that Smokey Rona told to Roy Tyson. Without that, we wouldn't know that this was actually murder committed by the mafia. We wouldn't know that. We wouldn't know who did it. So there's so many ways and so many important people who have given information, and the case should have been won on any one of those.
I know.
Which makes me look sideways at the judge. How could? What's up with him? Maybe he should be investigated. I don't know.
Did you see that he's retiring at the end of April?
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
I thought that was interesting. He's retiring at the end of April. So I'll be curious to see how that all plays out. One of the things, I have investigated a lot of these post-conviction cases. This one, what was particularly difficult about it was because the crime took place in 1960, before I was even born. So many people of relevance were deceased when I started to investigate, but more so, this file should have been massive. This file would have been huge. And what we've got, the file that remains, is a sliver of what would have been there. And I'm going to talk about this on Sunday, but one of the things that caught my eye, you know this from following the case, there's all this evidence pointing to the involvement of the Chicago Mafia, hired by, one of the husbands to kill his wife and the other women. There is nothing in the file currently that talks about the Chicago Mafia, suspecting the Chicago Mafia, a tip about the Chicago Mafia, speculation about the Chicago Mafia, nothing. But what really caught my eye, and this is why you really have to dig, and you know this as I'm preaching to the choir to a reporter. I was reading an article from 2000, the year 2000. What year was this? Where Harlan Warren, I think it was the 40-year anniversary of the Coverup murder. So I think it was the year 2000.
Yeah.
I'll show it. Harlan Warren had a quote that he basically said, well, I first thought the Illinois State Police knew what they were doing, but then they said they thought the Chicago Mafia was involved, so they clearly didn't know what they were doing. I was like, what? So let's pause there. He is saying the Illinois State Police thought the Chicago Mafia was involved. Where are all those documents where the Illinois State Police is talking about the Chicago Mafia? Those aren't anywhere now. Have you seen anything like that from the file? I haven't.
No. But in that same article, he said, I put the squash on the state police. He wanted to take it out of the hands of the state police and conduct it himself because he did not want it to point to the mafia. I think he was protecting the mob. They had gambling all over LaSalle County. Every tavern, every place you could think of had illegal gambling, and he was protecting them. That's why he wanted to protect the mafia. And you talked about a lot of the case files being missing. What else is missing? The log they claimed was the murder weapon, the camera and binoculars, which had blood and tissue. Those should have been kept on file forever, especially since the appeals never stopped.
Well, a couple things there. Harlan Warren's a little bit of an enigma because I do think there's some evidence that he was trying to clean up the gambling in the local area. But at the same time, I also agree with you that the only really reasonable conclusion is that he was sticking his nose in this for a reason, to direct the investigation for a reason. Because normally, and I talked about this at my last presentation, a state's attorney's job is to prosecute. It is not to investigate. In fact, in cases today, you normally cannot sue the state's attorneys because they have prosecutorial immunity. They only have liability if they're investigating the case. So it's not like if there's a crime in Kankakee or in Chicago, the state's attorney's not out there interviewing people, talking to witnesses, investigating. What happens is the local law enforcement investigates, If they have somebody they want to charge with a crime, they bring it to the state, the police, the state's attorney's office, I'm sorry, and they decide if they want to prosecute. So why is Harlan Warren in the fall of 1960 now sticking his nose in this, having a secret investigation with his handpicked guys, Dummett and Hess, his handpicked polygraph examiners, Stephen Kindig, John Reed, all doing this kind of like a secret investigation? I think you're right. This points to him directing things in a certain way to protect the real culprits, which included the Chicago Mafia. I just think that's clear as day.
Yeah, and why would he protect them? Because they had their hands in, what was it? Newspaper said there was 1,000 slot machines in LaSalle County at that time. Where did they come from? The Chicago mob. And you look at, he always acted like he was cleaning up gambling. That was his big deal. But look, go through the microfilm and you see who got busted. You know, small time places that had no connection to the mob. He didn't bust one place that had a mob connection. None of the busts that he made were tied to the mob at all. He let them go.
Yeah, and you know what people don't realize? I think the older generation that's alive knows this. People in their 70s and 80s definitely know this. In 1960, the Chicago Mafia had its tentacles everywhere. They weren't just in organized crime as mobsters. They had infiltrated the government, the police department, politics. I mean, they literally had their tentacles in businesses all over the place. So the influence and the power was there. And I think that's what people today don't really realize is back in 1960, because think about how powerful this force had to be to after Lois Zelensky heard what she heard, and they traced the call. The Illinois State Police did their job. They traced the call, okay? And they got a result. Call originates at the bar in Aurora owned by Glenn Palmatier. The call is placed to his brother, William, at his house in Peru. And to think that the powers that be made that go away, that's how powerful of a force we're talking about.
Well, and he had his handpicked polygraph guy in Chicago say that Lois failed her test. The phone records backed her up.
It is. I almost, there's a part of me, that's why I'm going to focus on this more. I feel like my last presentation, and by the way, everybody out there, if you know, for those of you who missed it, it's on YouTube. Go to the Andy Hale podcast, go to my YouTube page. That presentation is in 9 parts. They're each about 20 minutes long. It is so comprehensive. I think I had over 300 PowerPoint slides. And I walk through the investigation, well, the case chronologically, so you can kind of see how it played out. There's so much detail there. But to make this go away, that's why I want to really focus on just this one incident with Lois Zelensky, because we're going to talk about it on Sunday, April 12th. And I'm going to do what I did last time. I'm going to give everybody in the audience a copy of that 2-page memo from 1960. And you can read along with me. It is so incredibly detailed. It is so incredibly thorough. If you are a state's attorney, she is literally your dream witness. This is a woman who took her job so seriously, was so spot on about what she heard. And we know she was spot on because the memo even talks about her recounting these guys. She said one guy, it sounded like they were talking about they were talking about cars, but she said it sounded like a bigger transaction. Remember this? Not just the sale of one car, a bigger transaction. And guess what? Bill Palmatier had a car dealership. I mean, she was literally spot on. So think about this. Think about the powers that be were able to back the Illinois State Police off of all this. Can you believe that? It's still stunning to me.
Well, think about this. She gave her statement in 1960. It was never made public. And yet, what she said is the exact same thing that Smokey told Mr. Tyson in 1996, 36 years later. There's no way Smokey could have known that because it was never made public.
This is the part I want to talk about, the matchup. I talked to Roy Tyson before, I want to make this clear, before I got the Lois Zelensek memo, okay? There's two key parts Roy Tyson told me that when he told me them, they meant nothing to me. They were just part of the story he was recounting. The first is the guy had bloody overalls in the trunk of a car. Okay? Bloody overalls in the trunk of a car. That's what Roy told me that Smokey told him, that Smokey had bloody overalls in the trunk of a car. But I think the second part that is really incredibly corroborative is Smokey told Roy he wasn't sure what to do with the clothes, the bloody clothes. He wasn't sure what to do with them. There was this period of time where they remained in his car, and he wound up taking them to the Bureau County burn pit and burning them. So let's pause. If you're making up a story, there is no way you're going to add that little weird detail. Well, you know what? He didn't really know what to do with the clothes. He had them for a little bit of while, and then he burned them. And what did Lois Zelensek say? The kid still got bloody overalls on the trunk of the car. Spot on. And the other guy says, well, tell him to burn them. And what did Smokey's tell Roy? He burned them. You're right. It is hand and glove the way it fits.
And he couldn't have known that.
No.
There's no way he could have known that because her report was until you found it, it was not public.
No. It makes me want to scream. I've told this story about Lois Zelensek hundreds of times. Every time I tell it, like right now, it makes my head want to like explode like a volcano. It's incredible that and here's the thing. This poor woman was so traumatized by this. When you read her report, her interview, she knew that what she heard was supposed to be confidential. She knew under the rules of her job as a telephone operator, it was supposed to be confidential. But she says in there, but I also knew this was really important and it related to the murders. And she was so conflicted, she actually was thinking about talking to her priest. And she finally, when she confided in her neighbor and friend Gladys Brummel, who I met, by the way, also, who's in her 90s, her husband, Jim Brummel, an Aurora police officer, says, he hears the story, says, you got to report this, which she does. This woman is so credible. So to think that she gets dismissed because they have this bogus polygraph report in November, by the way, that says, it doesn't even say she failed. It just says things like, oh, she couldn't really remember what she heard, blah, blah, blah. And then to think that the judge seized on that, in our case, right, and actually bought that nonsense is just shocking to me.
Well, by all accounts, she was an honest woman, good wife, good mother, good member of the community, church going. And to have for Harlan Warren to have his polygraph guy discredit her, like she's not being totally honest. Who's not being totally honest?
It really, it's a complete travesty that they got this polygraph examiner who, oh, by the way, is friends with Robert Murphy, husband of Frances Murphy, to say the Palmatier brothers passed and she failed it. I told this story. When I tell this story to friends, I said, okay, telephone operator overheard this, these two brothers, the calls traced to William Palmatier's house. Okay, so there is no debate that he said this. Okay, he's just lying.
Yeah. And
I say, guess what? One person failed the polygraph. Guess who? Everybody, all my friends are like, oh, the one brother? I'm like, no. The other brother? No. Then they pause. And they're like, the polygraph examiner? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, what? It is, I go back to, the powers that be had to be so strong to make that go away. And here's the thing, Jim. We know that the Aurora police interviewed Lois Zelensek first. And then they passed her on to the Illinois State Police. and the Illinois State Police interview her, and they find in that memo, they find her to be sincere and credible. So all those people that met with her know this huge break in the case has happened. And I wonder what all those people felt, and if anybody said anything, when they find out that those guys, the Palmatier brothers, have just been basically cleared, and now Harlan Warren has his sights on this young 21-year-old dirt poor dishwasher named Chester Weger. I wonder what all those Aurora police officers and Illinois State police officers were thinking at the time. I really do.
Well, when did Lois come forth? Was it end of March, beginning of April, something like that? And yet they didn't question her until the end of August, and that's only because the newspapers got a hold of her somehow.
Well, she got interviewed.
Harlan Warren apologized to the Palmatiers before they even took their lie detector test.
Yeah, so she actually, the date of her interview with the Illinois State Police, I think that memo is dated April 21st. So she's interviewed in April. She hears this, in March, like a week after the murders. But you're right, Glenn Palmatier is not interviewed until August 30th. And you're right, I think it's September 1st, the next day. There's this profuse apology letter to William Palmatier before he's even taken a polygraph. And by the way, who cares, the polygraph? There's an apology letter to him. Like, oh, we're so sorry that your name got brought up in this. And I think Craig Armstrong is quoted in a newspaper. It was 1,000 to 1 shot. This was a massive, massive cover-up. And I'm just surprised, Jim, as I sit here today, I'm just surprised more people don't know about this part of the case, and I really want to raise awareness. But I think if anybody was aware, they would have. I don't think there's any other interpretation other than what you and I are saying. In my presentation in December, towards the end, I looked out at the audience and I said, is there anybody here who thinks little old Lois Zelensek was fabricating what she heard? Raise your hand. And guess what? Not a hand went up. Everybody knows she was honest and credible. And that memo, that interview is so detailed in what she heard. So detailed. So that is the case to me. That is the case. There is no good faith argument that can explain it away. Those brothers knew who was involved. A lot of people knew who was involved. And there were orders from some very, very powerful people to put it to rest. The Palmatier brothers, as I like to say, evaporated. And now there's this rogue investigation by Harlan Warren, a state's attorney, who's not supposed to be investigating anything. And then we go from basically October, November. They can't break him after those 2 months. They try everything. They trail him. They take him to Chicago for 24 hours. They threaten him with a thunderbolt. You know what? Nothing has worked. Nothing has worked. And then you know what they finally do? They finally play the nuclear card, which they didn't want to have to do, which is, let's just arrest Chester without probable cause, serve him with arrest warrants for murder, and that will create so much pressure that will break him. And that was their final nuclear card that they had to play, and that's what was played.
And he had to do it before he'd been defeated. He had to do it before he left office so he could take credit for it. That's the thing. I've talked to a lot of people, and not one person has said they think Chester is guilty. Not one. And I think after all this time, the only thing that most of the people know about this case, and they don't know too much, and they don't care too much about it because it happened a long time ago, and they don't know too much about it. The only thing they know about it is what the newspapers have repeated time and time and time again.
Or Steve Stout's book, which is the Harlan Warren's version.
And Steve Stout's book, which I think the only source he cites in his book is Harlan Warren. In my book, I've got more than 200 footnotes of different sources, and more that aren't footnoted. They're cited within the text. Uh, Look at all the people he could have talked to back in 1982. I mean, Lois Zelenzik, Bill Dummett,
Yeah.
James Supan. I mean, the list goes on and on. George Spiros, you name it.
Yeah.
And he didn't talk to anybody. He's got nobody in his book. But that's all most people know about the whole case.
Right. And that's why what I'm trying to do, and this is the thing that really is stunning to me. I have been trying to share information with the public, to educate them, and also to get tips. And I've gotten some great tips from people who've come forward. And you know what? During our post-conviction hearing, and I think you were in court and you saw this, the Will County State's Attorney's Office would mock me and make fun of me and kind of degrade me for having a podcast and, doing this stuff. It really was, I think, beneath the office, the stature of the office to do that. But I think you're right. And that's why anybody who actually takes the time to read your book, to listen to my podcast, to review the evidence, there is no case against Chester Weger. There just simply isn't. It's not one of these, there's two sides to the story, there's a debate. There is no debate. It is a clear-sided case of a false confession. And here's the sad part, Jim. We'll wrap it up here in a minute because I want to save the rest for when we're at Grand Bear Resort. I've defended a lot of cases for the Chicago police where sometimes you'll get this notion that the police have tunnel vision or it's mistaken identity, and maybe there was a good faith belief, a gut feeling that somebody did it and they didn't. This was not an accident with Chester Weger. Once you know what Lois Zelenzik said and what the Palmatier brothers said and all that, and then you go to, Chester Weger's story, this is what's really kind of like scary. This was an intentional ploy to have somebody else pay the price for this horrible crime. And then despite knowing that, in my opinion, it was known Chester Weger. If you know all the facts like we do, you would know Chester Weger didn't do it. The state wanted the jury to vote to kill him, to electrocute him. And that is the most astonishing, scary thing of all.
They not only wanted to find anybody to close the case, they mostly wanted to find somebody to take the focus off the Chicago mob and one of the husbands.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, I could talk to you for hours. I'm looking forward to Sunday, April 12th, Grand Bear Resort, 1 o'clock. Admission is free, people. I'm even going to provide some snacks, some beverages. It's a Sunday afternoon. Come out, spend a couple hours with us. We're going to go through some of the key evidence. I think you'll find it enlightening. And if you know anybody that may know something, if you've got relatives, friends, family, especially the older people in the community, bring them as well. I really am trying to reach people that know something. I am convinced there are still people out there that know things, and they may think what they know is not that important, but you know what? Every little puzzle piece can make a difference. So I urge you, come on out, bring friends, bring family. There's going to be a big ad in the paper. I don't know when this podcast is going to air, actually probably afterwards, but there will have been an ad in the LaSalle News Tribune, in the Ottawa Times, in the Bureau County Republican. I'm going to try to spread the word on social media. Please, Jim, spread the word with your contacts. And I look forward to seeing you at Grand Bear Resort Sunday, April 12th at 1 o'clock.
I'll see you then.